what I tended to do was to gravitate towards large emerging market opportunities. The biometric sensor in a wireless phone is a good example. There's got to be some way to secure transactions and access, and I knew it was going to come.
Okay, so welcome back to season 2 of The Untrapped Entrepreneur. As you know, we are talking about being married and running a business, starting a business, all of that good stuff, which Mike has a lot of experience doing. I have Mike Powell here. Mike, I think we got connected through the Gents Place, no?
We did.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
All right, so Mike's...
My favorite spot in Fort Worth,
all
Texas.
right.
It really is.
Thank you for the plug there. So, as you know, guys, that I own the Gents Place. We started 15 years ago, membership-based men's grooming concept, and so Mike is one of our fans there in Fort Worth. Mike, let's start out. We'll dive into the marriage stuff for sure. But for those of you that have no idea who Mike Powell is, what he does, you want to give us a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey, as much as you'd like to share in a couple minutes, just so we have some context on where you're coming from.
Sure. Thumbnail sketch. So I grew up in a family-owned business. My parents were very entrepreneurial. Actually, my dad drove long haul trucks until I was 14 years old. And he basically tried to raise 5 kids doing that. And he was on the road 5, 6 days a week.
Wow.
And he figured out how to take that and turn it into a wireless telecommunications business. So I kind of cut my teeth in this business industrial communications, two-way radios, pre-cellular. So Dad did some amazing things. It was the first solar-powered mountaintop repeater in the world.
Wow.
My dad put up, and I was 14 years old accompanying him. I kind of got their bug for this entrepreneur thing early, but early in the career, I was with Motorola Communications and Electronics, who was a powerhouse company at that time, hired away by my customer, which was Pacific Telesis, which is one of the Bell operating company. It was probably one of the first 15 people formally hired to deploy cellular networks. I was in charge of inland California and dealers, distributors. And from there, I went immediately on my entrepreneur path. So I actually assembled a group of investors to acquire the non-wireline license for the cellular network in Las Vegas, Nevada. And powerful investors. I was a kid. I was literally 26 years old. And I say kid. You have 26-year-olds on this that are much more mature than
I
I
still
was.
call them kids.
So
I just passed 40. They're all kids to me.
yes, yes. So kind of the summary of this is I ended up having a pretty diverse set of technologies that I got myself engaged in. I had a passion for wireless because I kind of grew up with it. Um, so I'll just name a couple of high points in my career and then we can move on from this. But we ended up building a business anyway as a reseller. That was a pretty powerful opportunity. I then went on to build a number of other companies. I'll give you a couple of examples. First wireless shopping portal was called IQ Order. It was founded by a guy named Michael Bates. I was his executive vice president. I did all this strategic relationship management and got some big deals done with companies like American Express. We ended up 9 months from start to trade sell for about $65 million, which was one of the fastest. And we had 150 employees during that same period. So it was purchased by a public company out of Seattle, Washington. And that was a massive success. Unfortunately, we took our ownership mostly in shares. And this particular public company had a share value at the time of the transaction of about $250 per share, as I remember. So just go back to March of 2000. My wife and I are in Israel, and I'm reading the news about this crash. That $250 share price went down to less than 20 cents in about 45 days. So it was a massive success, but it We should have taken more cash off the table. That was the summary of that deal. Um,
Mm.
and then I've done a few other things, but right after that event, I was hired by a guy named Regis McKenna.
Oh my God.
Um, a lot of folks, unless they're my age, don't remember that Steve Jobs' right hand marketing guru was Regis McKenna. And he founded his own consultancy. And I worked for Regis, but not in his consultancy. He basically wanted to have more ownership in the businesses he was helping to build and thrive. So he created a venture capital fund, and my job was venture
Mm.
creation lead. And in that venture creation lead, I formed a lot of companies. It was crazy. I had more ideas than I thought anybody could consume, but they wanted all of them. So the biometric sensor that was up until the last two, I think, releases of Apple phones was my startup there. Started out as iControl, became a Trua, acquired by Authentic, and then Apple acquired it. And so I had this passion for security on wireless devices, um, non-repudiation of big transactions. It was all going to happen. It was going to come. It's
Mm.
now been replaced by obviously face scanning. So um, I've done a lot. I will tell you just up to the point where you can probably take a 45-minute show out of this one statement I'll make. My last business that I founded was called Strongwatch. This is the one we had to pivot from a DoD contract award to a border security solution. That was a very stressful time. In fact, I will say
Mhm.
that I didn't know how stressful it was until after I'd left it. Um, but my wife had the wisdom to recognize the stress that I went through during that. If you can get PTSD in anything, you can get it in too many early stage, high stress startups. Um, she
Mm.
recognized this and she basically said, "Honey, do you think instead of doing another startup, because I had another one, could you get a regular job?" And I thought about it for about 5 minutes, and I said,
That's definitely
after
true.
all that you've basically supported during my career, I think I can do that. And I picked out one company, and it was this company
Mhm.
called Elbit America, out of headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas, wholly owned subsidiary of an Israeli parent, which is Elbit Systems Limited, the largest prime DoD contractor in Israel. And
Mhm.
I this is my last week with Elbit, and I'm moving on. Um, and here's what my wife recognized about me. Following my move into a regular job, I still operate like an entrepreneur. She thinks I own the place because of the way that I work. And I'm not kidding. And so she basically released me to go back into the startup world. And Monday of next week, on the 11th, I start up with
Mhm.
one of the most exciting companies that I've seen in 25 years, a company
Yeah.
called General Radar. So I'm excited to join that team. It is a brilliant, crazy group of guys, young Turks that want to turn an industry upside down, and they are succeeding. So um, listen to your wife. She will.
Amazing.
She can save you a
Yeah.
lot of aggravation.
In the show right now, this is marriage and entrepreneurship. Just listen to your wife and you'll be fine. Um, one of the things that I'm really intrigued by, Mike, is that I don't know who's listening on our show. I imagine there's people that are just starting their entrepreneurial journey and maybe those that have been doing it for a long time. But I know for me, I was the kid of two military parents. My dad was in the Air Force, my mom worked DoD, and I didn't have I didn't really have the ability or just the concept of thinking big. And so just hearing a number like $1 million or $10 million, a contract for $49 million, 100 million, sold the company for 65 million. Um, that was intimidating for me until I got much further along in my entrepreneurial journey. That here I am, like my small business, trying to get things going and just, doing my first $500,000 in sales and 750 and then doing 1 million. Um, it seems like you've lived in this world though, where maybe from early on, where you've been involved in very large projects and big deals and contracting with the government and all of that. So it's intriguing to me because we don't talk to many. I haven't yet talked to many people like you that have done business at that sort of scale from day one. Have you ever thought about that? Just like, I don't think, the small business owner mindset is like, how do I get a few $100,000 in sales? I wish I would have from the very beginning had this, like, broken the seal of my thinking and my potential. But have you ever thought about, you're a unique guy in the quote startup world, because when you think of doing a startup, I imagine you think of doing something pretty big.
Large emerging market opportunities is always the way I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I've also done living room screen printing on little plastic things that suck onto the window of your car, so you've got an auto note. I've done the little tiny stuff, and it was more the uh, the fun and the excitement that somebody likes this and they're going to buy it.
Hmm.
You got to be careful what you're going to put your time at, is what I learned from all of those experiences. Why what they actually did help to grow me, and to, I wouldn't say I had this big dollar world mindset my entire career. Even when I still operate like, the guy that's trying to make the next $1,000 so that he can get the car payment done, and
Hmm.
he's got power at the house. I
Yeah.
mean, I still operate in many ways like that. Um, I guess being frugal, or trying to be good stewards of the funds that you've got available to spend. I mean, I will never stay in a hotel at that price.
Yeah.
I'm going to search it out, and I do that today.
Well, I admire
But
people that have limitless thinking in that regard, where you can see a path to creating $100 million idea or a $50 million contract. Because I think a lot of people, at least that was me early on, I couldn't even get my mind to thinking that that was even possible.
yeah, so what I tended to do was to gravitate towards large emerging market opportunities. The biometric sensor in a wireless phone is a good example. There's got to be some way to secure transactions and access, and I knew it was going to come. This was way early. This is before you could buy one for your front door,
Hmm.
right? I mean, and it was hard because they're a very small device. You've got to have the electronics and the authentication capabilities built in, and that meant the device had to be designed around it. Um, but if you could win that, it had huge implications, volume and revenue.
Hmm.
Same thing with the Strong Watch mission. I mean, that was going to be almost a $200 million award.
Hmm.
Reasonable margins. I mean, we're not talking about, for a DoD contract, you're not going to get you know, a 40% operating profit. You're operating on 10% OP, or
Hmm.
12% or 15% max. So, you're working for your money.
Yeah.
It's not like hospital gowns that probably have a relatively low margin.
Hmm.
I'm not going to compare it to the toilet paper industry, but you're talking about like 3-4% margin. It's like
Yeah.
you got to make everything perfect in order to be profitable, and then it's only so profitable. So I have thought about it. I've probably gotten a bit cavalier. I Probably the largest contract that I ever closed was a $50 million contract, and I did it all by myself as an entrepreneur, trying to build a foundation to go grow a business. So
Hmm.
it was a big deal then. I couldn't fathom $50 million when I did this.
Yeah.
And I just kind of drove myself through it because, like you, it's a block.
Hmm.
I mean, I felt that way, and sometimes I still do, but I'm now selling, you know, 30. You've got
Yeah.
to have it.
Yeah. That's worth
So
that's worth many millions of dollars for sure.
it is. Yeah.
Um, Well, hey, Mike. So I appreciate you explaining a little bit of your journey, and you've been married for 30 something years.
Forward
30.
34 years.
Okay, I was testing you to see, make sure you knew the exact year. Okay, so you passed that test.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
the wife's listening in. 34 years of you kind of bouncing around. I imagine it's probably taken some physical moves to different places. Certainly taken up a lot of time, in your life pursuing some of these things. Tell us how you two first met, and maybe just kind of the early on in the journey. Did she know she was getting married to an entrepreneur type mindset here? Did she know you were eventually going to go out and do startup after startup?
She probably didn't right out of the chute. Um, we met in Tucson, Arizona, where we spent 32 of those 34 years. Um, and I've got a strange background. So I've got my family I mentioned was in the radio common carrier business,
Hmm.
business industrial two-way radio. My mom's family were ranchers in Nevada, northern Nevada. So I kind of had this, technology with a cowboy hat.
Hmm.
Seriously, I rodeoed for many years,
You fit right in
bareback
Fort
saddle
Worth,
broncs,
sir.
and I'm sorry.
I said you fit right in Fort Worth then.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, I don't even put on cowboy boots. I do wear a cowboy hat when I do field exercises and demonstrations. But um, so this unusual background basically, um, I completely forgot where I was going with.
No, just
What
talking
was
about
your?
how you two first met, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So Tucson is kind of uh, it's a awesome place to live, by the way. In spite of the temperatures from May to end of September,
Mhm.
you just stay in air condition. But we actually met at um, a rodeo weekend. So they have a big rodeo out there, Los Vaqueros Rodeo. It's a professional rodeo cowboy association rodeo, and we met at a country bar dance hall called the Cactus Moon Cafe. And I actually knew Kristen's sister, Kelly, and she introduced me to Kristen. And that very first meeting, and then the next day, we all went together to the rodeo. And I knew some of the cowboys, and I was back behind the chutes while they're in the grandstands, and I come back out, and we have been unseparated since then. I mean,
Wow.
it's been a long, long time. It's been quite a journey. She did learn pretty quickly after we were married that I aspired to something better for our family,
Mhm.
and I thought the way to do that was through early stage startup technology company. So I founded a company within about 7 or 8 months of when we were married, called Athenix, and it was all founded in Tucson, Arizona. In fact, most of what I built, I did it from Tucson, either there or remotely. I had some Silicon Valley startups when I was with Regis McKenna, but we did everything there. We raised 5 kids. Um, I was, you know, crazy work hours and travel life, but we had just a rock solid home environment. Our kids are excellent adults now, which
Mhm.
is a joy for any parent to see as their children grow up and to be productive members of society. Um, and so I attribute all of that success to my wife because she was the anchor in the household while I'm doing all of the, you know, where the rubber meets the sky stuff, as I like
Mhm.
to call it sometimes.
I haven't heard that before,
Um,
but I totally get that. I know exactly what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. So anyway, that's how we met, and it's been quite a journey.
Well, being married such a long time, plus having some businesses along the way, and I know you just recently took a turn in well, in another direction a few years ago. Now you're back in the game, but you're in a very small category. We talk about like the one percenters, or the you're probably in like the 0.1% of people have been married 30 plus years and have continued in your entrepreneurial journey, and raised some amazing kids. And so that's what the season's all about. If you are talking to someone who is just starting out in their entrepreneurial journey and they're not married yet, and they happen to meet somebody, like, is there any, looking back, is there any like a disclosure that you should make as an entrepreneur? Like, hey, this is how it's going to be, to kind of help that relationship last. Sometimes we all feel like we get lucky and our spouse gets it. But most marriages end in divorce. And a lot of times it goes back to the beginning where maybe it wasn't a good fit from the start. And so as an entrepreneur, like, is there any advice that you would give if you're, and how to talk to a maybe a new spouse or a potential spouse, disclosing like, this is how these are my needs as an entrepreneur, or how you could kind of cover some of these things early on versus them being surprises later.
Yeah. So first, I think I would acknowledge that my brain is wired differently. Yours is too.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like just a moment of fancy that you're seeing yourself as an entrepreneur. You actually think this way. And I've been working in a prime contractor, a $1.7 billion business, 3,700 employees. Everybody that I work with saw the way I operated.
Mm-hmm.
They all knew I was an entrepreneur. I'm in a big company acting like I'm running a startup, and I
Mm-hmm.
literally did it that way. So I think that's important for people to first understand, is if you actually have these characteristics that draw your attention and kind of passion towards building new and this entrepreneurial environment. The first thing I would say is, when my wife and I married, I had this dog-eared sheet of paper. It was a poem. It was called "Until One Is Committed," and that was my theme in early stage business. I'm committing. I'm not necessarily committing to the path that I've started. I know that agility is essential for an entrepreneur's success, but I applied the same principles in my marriage. We are deeply committed, and we've had some rough road during
Mm-hmm.
this 34 years. I mean, everybody does. It just happens. Some people, I suppose, are blessed to have forgotten it, but I think we all experience it.
Yeah.
Um, and this "until one is committed," there's always hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Um, all acts of commitment essentially are made, and providence moves.
Mm-hmm.
All things that you wouldn't have imagined in your favor will come to you. And I feel the same way about our marriage. We're deeply committed. We are not unaware of the characteristics that each of us possess that have to be fulfilled. And mine is this startup thing.
Mm-hmm.
That my wife would agree for me to take this job is after I agreed to take a regular job, and so you got to be willing to partner with your spouse. That doesn't mean that they need to be a partner in your business.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would advise against that, because it takes one sane mind all the time in a high stress environment to keep a household stable. Sometimes it will be, the entrepreneur, but you really need to have a bit of isolation from some of that stress. Not that you don't want to share it with them, but you don't want them to walk in your shoes. You
Mm-hmm.
want them to really recognize it, understand it, and support you getting through difficult periods because it's going to happen.
How do you navigate that? We have some, I was talking before the show with you. You have some people that are working the business together, they're both in it, operating it. You have another that's maybe the spouse is somewhat involved in the business. And then a third scenario where the spouse is completely uninvolved in the business, obviously involved in
Yeah.
your life, but uninvolved in the business. In that third case where they have no idea what you're doing, like they couldn't help you in your business even if they tried because it's different skill set, maybe different interest level. How do you bridge that gap though when you have a bad day at work, you're struggling, there's stress, all these things, and the other person can't possibly, you couldn't possibly articulate exactly why you feel that way, but you there still needs to be understanding there. Like how have you handled that?
So sometimes I've avoided the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
not really call it fatigue. I don't want to have to go through that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll give a summary of what's going on, and yeah, it was a difficult moment with an investor,
Mm-hmm.
within a board meeting, within a customer quality review, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, probably the hardest things that I've gone through, um, I had to let Kristen know. She had to know. I mean, I've been through periods that were so stressful. I look back on them now and recognize that we shared it across every employee in the company. It wasn't just me bearing the burden. They all bore the burden.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, they volunteered to try to get us through a tough period. Have you ever been in one of these businesses where you've got employees and you can't make payroll?
Mm-hmm.
It's and you're it's the fishes and loaves story. How are you going to survive this? Okay, um, one team member. What is the most critical needs you need to cover down this month, and we figure out a way to make sure that he's covered down on those things. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we've been through some really high stress moments, not ever intending to be in that place, but unforeseen circumstances, things beyond your control occurred, that made it very difficult to circumvent those challenges. And I've always made my wife completely aware of what's going on. I don't like to be surprised at work if we're going to be late on a delivery, or there's a massive challenge from a piece of technology that we just can't figure out. I need to know about it as fast as I can so that we can prepare to communicate with others, whether it's investors or customers or partners.
Mm-hmm.
And I give my wife the same courtesy when we've got challenges like that. I'd say those things can break a marriage.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that when you're in a tough spot, you've got to be willing to share that, no matter how hard it is. They need to know. They have a right to know.
Well, before the
And
the show, you shared this. It really stopped me, and it asked you why, or if you could go back and talk to your past self about how to optimize marriage and business ownership. One of the things that really stopped me in my tracks is you said face your fears with your spouse. I thought that was really powerful. Tell me more about that.
yeah, well, as a young man, newly married, I would say that one of the greatest fears that I had was not appearing as strong as I wanted to,
Mm,
not appearing as capable as I wanted to be. Um, and you kind of put a mask on and you try to address the things, and cowboy up.
mm,
You need to go through this, and you don't need to whine to your wife. In reality, I have learned that she knows me better than I know myself. And she saw it the whole time, but I was thinking that my mask was covering it. So being really true, being a human being means that you've got to be honest. You've got to open up enough to let your spouse in. And my fears were that I just wasn't going to measure up to the persona that I was attempting to portray.
Mm.
And I've let that guard down many years ago.
Yeah.
I am a man that sometimes is overwhelmed by um, things, and I need to take a break from it. I know when I need to take that break, and she knows, she can tell. Um, Take the time to kind of give yourself some separation from it and decompress a bit and get out of your head, because that's really, I think, probably one of my biggest challenges, that the get out of your head side of that. I use all the time,
Mm-hmm.
um, in lots of different ways. Um, there are moments where, if I don't do this, I know that um, my intentions are good, but my actions will not produce the results I'm looking for.
Mm.
And so I delay some of those actions, and it makes all the difference. Just being willing to, um, facing the fears is what we do in life. And you've we've all had these moments where we've got this big step up, and it's darn scary. We're going from here, we're making a commitment to here.
Mm-hmm.
We've never been there. You don't know whether you're going to survive that, where you're going to fail. And you've got to make those leaps in order to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, uncomfortable, like high stress, even anxiety ridden situations. Once you survive that process and you start to master this growth, you will be amazed at what you're capable of. Your mind is going to expand in that skill and knowledge of that one step in ways that is profound. And if you involve your wife in it, you both will. I think that's what I've learned
Mm-hmm.
is keeping her aware at all times. This decision that I've just recently made was a significant one. I had two companies that I was working with. Both of them wanted me equally.
Mm-hmm.
One of them said, "Yes, well, we're going to make you a position that will be the highest paid employee in the organization. That's how bad we want you, Mike."
Mm-hmm.
And it happens to be an employee-owned company, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a hard decision to decide which way to go, and I was stressed for about 2 weeks over, where to go. And it was actually my wife's calm wisdom that really helped me to kind of take the signal from the noise and make those decisions. So she's constantly there to support me, and fortunately, she's been able to work at focusing on our household and our children, and now our children and our grandchildren. Um, and so this work has enabled us to have a life where we get to, it's very uncommon, I suppose, today. I don't know statistically where it's at, but there are a lot of two income families out there trying to raise kids. I can't imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's a tough job. No question
yeah,
about that. Hey, was there
yeah.
you may be able to think of a million of these. I know I can, but a particular moment in time where you thought my marriage is done, my business is done, like you got to a point of a fork in the road, and how you got out of that, and thinking about maybe someone who's there right now who's listening, or someone that might be in that place in the future. Could you kind of briefly describe like what where you were, and then spend some time unpacking how you worked out of it, because you're clearly in a great place today, but I just know the entrepreneurial journey is a roller coaster, so at some point you certainly hit some lows.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you
You have to
you
pick one.
predicted
Sorry,
that
man.
accurately. Yeah, so I've been there, and yeah, so for the young guy or gal, man or woman that's listening to this that is experiencing that, uh, I've I've been at the low point of wondering, is there any way that this can work? I mean, it feels like we're kind of done.
Hmm.
I've been there, and I had great advice from a pastor
Hmm.
that, and he gave us both the same advice, which was get out of your head,
Hmm.
step back, and fake it till you make it, which we've all heard that statement. But in reality, being kind to one another, treating one another with respect, even when it's hard.
Hmm.
Um,
Especially when it's hard, right?
oh, especially when it's hard, um, absolutely transforms your mind. It is amazing at when you're at your absolute bleakest moment. You start to love someone actively in your actions, even if you didn't feel the love. It's more the act of doing the things that go along with that. It it is transformational, and I use it in business. I had, in fact, always used it in business. It is the power of positive thinking. Frankly, I
Hmm.
mean, it's Norman Vincent Peale. That book, pick
Hmm.
it up and read it, because you can our impact in the way that we show up to our spouse has a profound impact on their response to us, and it can be this virtuous circle of growth. And you find yourself looking back, and you're amazed that you made it through. You're also amazed at how easy it was,
Hmm.
and you're right back to the relationship on a new track with new learning and new experience, that makes it stronger. And so I don't know if that's helpful. That's seriously, that's what saved my marriage more than once.
Well, you mentioned before the show, when we are down, we always go back to acting like when we were last in love, even when we aren't feeling it, and magically and suddenly returns. And so I think that's what you're talking about there, is even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, is being intentional about acting like you were when you were kids, when you first met.
Yeah, and I'm a terrible actor, to be
Yeah.
honest. I've had acting opportunities, by the
Yeah.
way. It's got some interesting stories about that. I basically turned it down. Just let me do the stunt double work on horseback. I can't read this line. So I'm not a good actor, but I know what it looks like to be a good husband, and I
Mhm.
know what it looks like to be a good spouse, and I can emulate that, and just in emulation, it changes everything.
Mhm. Well, and the last thing in wrapping up here that really struck me is what you just mentioned. I'll say it in your own words. You said, for a startup technology company, requires a home filled with optimism and hopeful possibilities. And so I think that's true for me too. Like, if and entrepreneurs are the most optimistic and also craziest, and in a good way, people that I've ever met, because we see the good in everything. We'll see the good in our businesses. Of course, there's downs, but as soon as there's a down, we see things other people can't see in our businesses, in our marriage, and our kids. Um, and so I think that's maybe why, I don't know, God has drawn me to entrepreneurship, because I was born that way, or it's just been this calling. But entrepreneurs are optimists. They have to be, in order to make it work. I don't know if I've ever met somebody who is
Uh,
not an
you,
optimist as a business
yeah,
owner.
yes, actually, I mean, I completely agree. And And I also believe that we all have probably some common themes or traits within us. And if we let the psychologist get a hold of us, we're going to be somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. I always say
But
it's not a disease; it's a condition. Going back to the advice you would give a young man or a young woman in their early spouse or dating is like, I have a condition I need to tell you about. My
yep,
brain works a
yep,
little differently. Right?
yep. I have this set of friends, all of them would easily, I mean, all of us would be classified as a bit ADD.
Hmm.
I think to me, it's just this um, insatiable desire to create and and to generate.
Hmm.
That's what it is for me,
Yeah.
um, and I think there's real power in it. I frankly believe that if it weren't for entrepreneurs and salespeople, the world would stop.
Yeah.
You got to have both,
Yeah.
um,
That's so
and
true.
yeah,
Well, speaking of Mike, wrapping up here. I forgot to do our commercial break for in talking about creation. We've created yet another business, which you've probably gotten a ton of emails about, called the Gents Store. So it's thegentsstore.com.
unbelievable portfolio of products.
Oh, thank
I,
you.
it's amazing.
Well, we're just getting started, man. We got over 3,000 products on there, and so for you listeners, we do have a code for free shipping, which is untrapped. But over 3,000 products there, and if you're in one of our markets where you're a member, 20% of your purchases go back towards your annual membership. If you're not in market, still a great website. And judging by Mike's reaction, that was very genuine. I didn't tell him to. I didn't pay him to say that.
No,
Mike's
no, but you got one fine employee in Stephen.
Oh, he's great.
He he's awesome.
Yeah.
So he showed me the site, and I mean, I'm there's some things on there I'm buying before the end of this week. So
It's great.
I'll get my next year's. You said 20% of all the.
20%. Yeah. So you could
That's
find
an
your way to
awesome
a
deal.
complimentary membership here pretty quickly if you spend enough time on the site.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll get out there this week.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, thanks for your time and just for sharing your story of your successful marriage. And I know it's been a roller coaster and marriage and business, and that's just such as life. But I appreciate you sharing the ups and downs with us, and for everyone listening in. Thank you for listening to the episode today, and we'll catch you on the next one.